Good afternoon, everyone. This is the March 16th, 2022 meeting of the Long Range Development Oversight Committee. May I have a roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. We have Chair Friedman.
Here.
Councilmember Gutierrez is not present. Councilmember Jordan.
Here.
Thank you.
We have a quorum, so we will be moving on. And preliminary matters, item A, are there any announcements?
No, Mr. Chair.
Hearing any changes to the agenda? We had talked about it, but it looks like it's fine, so I don't see anything on that for agenda review. Anything else to add, Ms. Brooke, for agenda review?
No, not at this time.
And we need to approve the minutes from October 14th, 2021. Have you had a chance to review those, Mr. Jordan? And if so,
Yep.
can I get a motion?
Yep, so I'll move approval.
All right, I will second. And before we take a vote, is there any public comment on the minutes?
Councilmember Friedman, there are no hands raised to make public comment this time. If you do wish to make public comment, click the hand icon. If you're connecting by phone, press *9 to raise or lower your hand. Press *6 to mute or unmute yourself. And no raised hands. Thank you.
So may we get a roll call, please?
We have Councilmember Jordan,
Yes.
Chair Friedman.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, minutes are approved, and this is general public comment. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak to any items not on today's agenda, but under the purview of the Oversight Committee? If so, please raise your hand in the app.
There are no raised hands in the attendees panel. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll close public comment, and we will move on to agenda item the update on the land use development team customer engagement. And I will turn that over to Ms. Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Jordan. The presentation today will be shared by myself and Ellen Kokenda, who will kick us off. But I did want to just mention overall, there are many other members of the land development team here in attendance. So should you get to questions and you have questions for other members, please feel free. And I've let them know it's okay for them to go ahead and jump in and help us answer questions too. But I just want to acknowledge this is a team. Most of what we do is done with that mindset. And so what we share today is really, we are just the spokespersons today, but I want to know that there's a lot of people collaborating on all of this in the background. And with that, I'll hand it over to Ms. Kokenda.
All right, thank you so much, Chair Friedman and Councilmember Jordan. So I just want to ground you a little bit in kind of where we've been. As you know, the Novak report came out in 2020 that had a laundry list of process improvements and recommendations for the land development team to follow. We spent a little over a year of implementing a lot of those changes, and we received feedback from this subcommittee to do a point-in-time survey that we said, okay, enough has changed. Let's understand how we're doing. And so what we did in September of 2021, we worked with our consultant, Robert Tenick, to craft a customer experience survey, an electronic survey that was sent out, and we received input back in September, which we shared with you in October. And then as a follow-up, we wanted to get a little bit more in depth of what we heard from that customer experience survey to not only have focus groups with our customers, but then also have a chance to talk to staff so we could have a complete picture of what we've heard. So in addition to the focus groups in December or January of this year, we sent out a counter staffing survey to all the LDT counter staff and received that feedback. Next slide, please. So in terms of our focus groups, as I mentioned, in December 2021, we conducted 7 focus groups in totals, specifically talking about customer service. We had 2 with the design professionals and planners, a focus group with homeowners, and so that we could understand, they're coming at this process and LDT from a very different perspective than our regulars and people that we work with every single day. We had a focus group with our LDT staff applicants. So this is a really unique group because not only are they LDT staff, but they also are often submitting projects to the city on behalf of Public Works. So they have to go, they're subject to the same process as everybody else. So they have a unique perspective. We spoke with our building and safety staff, both counter staff as well as the inspectors out in the field, because with all of our changes to on-demand permits and our move for remote inspections, they gave us a lot of feedback on what we heard from, or like kind of the counter to what customers were experiencing. They were telling us how the operations were happening on the ground and through the permitting process. And then we held two staff focus groups specifically with LDT counter staff, because we really needed to understand like how things were happening, like what the operations in the lobby were, with all of the different channels for communication and all the changes to our process. We needed to kind of dive in deep with that. Next slide, please. So just to kind of, again, ground you and like remind you of what we heard from our customers. There were two overarching themes, not only from the customer experience survey, but then also what we heard in the focus group. And those perspectives on customer service, one is that some people want really easy access to in-person services and faster and more consistent responses. And then secondly, some people want a virtual experience that's going to be so robust that they don't even need in-person services. So we're kind of operating with this two like hybrid expectations of what good customer service should be. And then when we looked into specifically, what did we hear about their desire for how counter services should change? This is what we heard. And again, all of this was reinforced in the focus group feedback, is that customers want more staff time. They want staff to be available when they have questions. That's pretty straightforward. They want more training and consistency and accountability. Consistency that, you know, depending on who they speak with, they might get 5 different answers, and it doesn't necessarily give them much hope or faith in how they're supposed to move forward with their project, especially if something has to go to a public hearing, it's discretionary. They want to know what's right and how to best navigate the process. So it doesn't help if we don't have consistent answers for them. They want better staff communication and response time. We heard a lot of feedback in, again, both the survey and the focus group that I'm calling, nobody's answering, I've emailed, I can't get someone to respond to my plan check comments, I can't get someone to pick up the phone, I'm just desperate. I just want someone there, and I'm, you know, and they're desperate to just find the first person. And then lastly, they really want kind of better staff attitude and teamwork. And what what we mean by this is that it's not necessarily an individual, like staff has a bad attitude overall. It's more just the collective, like that our customers want to know that we genuinely want to create a better process for them and that we want them to have a good outcome. So it's just kind of that level of support and kind of feeling. And that's what we mean by that. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we did our customer experience survey. We had focus groups with the customers and staff, but this is really our time in January to have a counter staffing survey, to be able to fill out the whole picture of what's been happening on the ground for a little over 1.5 years now, almost 2 years. So we drafted an electronic survey. We sent it out to all the LDT counter staff. And what we heard back was that they're really, looking and analyzing the data. There are 5 issue areas that really affect customer service. One is the lobby operations, virtual appointments. I'm kind of grouping the website and ACA or Acela together. And the ACA is the side that the customers have to use. So that's kind of the approach that I'm thinking of. And then staffing and training. Next slide. But today, I'm really just going to focus on 2 of the issue areas, the lobby operations and virtual appointments, and kind of how we went through our analysis. And there's a specific reason for this, is that we had to close back down. So our lobby reopened, and then closed back down due to the coronavirus. And after Omicron, and kind of once we were looking at reopening again our lobby doors, the direction is that when we reopen, we want to have kind of what are our lobby operations going to look like? What is it going to look like for our walk-in customers? Because if we have to constantly change the messaging and the communications to our customers of, oh, we're open this, and now we're doing this, and now we're changing the policy, it gets dense and difficult. So we spent all of our effort trying to analyze these two issues in order to come up with a solution and a game plan to move forward as soon as we opened our doors, so that we wouldn't be changing things up on people, a couple weeks down the road as things moved forward. Next slide, please. So in terms of what we heard from our staff, one of the questions we asked them are, what are the top 3 challenges with hybrid services or with hybrid counter services that you're experiencing? What we heard overall, number 1 is that staff are juggling their meetings and other workload with all of their counter shift duties, that it was really difficult to do that. We heard that they were saying that the second challenge is consistency with their coworkers. So staff acknowledged too that there are consistency issues and that it's really difficult to be consistent. And then 3, I don't know who to contact for help, or no one's around. A lot of that has to do with, counter staff have kind of been the ones to field anything and everything when our lobby doors are open. And so if you don't know, or we have new staff on, so they just don't have necessarily the history, or there just might be a little bit more anxiety there if something comes up in that way. Next slide, please. Secondly, we asked, when the counter is busy and you cannot complete all your tasks, which tasks do you prioritize? You're going to sense a theme. In-person appointments is a high priority, helping walk-in customers, virtual appointments. And then as you see, kind of getting down, processing online applications, responding to emails, returning phone calls. We prioritize whenever someone is directly in front of us. And that makes sense. If someone's in front of you, you're generally going to help them out. So the in-person appointments, that makes the most sense. That's been set up. Then I'm going to help walk-in customers. But then there are all these other critical counter services that get pushed aside when you're trying to do everything all at once, and you might only have 1 or 2 people at the counter. Next slide, please. So the problem with our lobby operations across the LDT is that counter staff are just juggling too much at once, and that they're not necessarily being effective at customer service based on all of these different channels of communication that they were expected to do over the last 1.5 years while operating the counter. 2 is that we're really focused on walk-ins. And what I mean by that as a problem is that generally walk-ins, we're taking priority over every other customer. And so a walk-in is, it's kind of first come, first serve as our model. But because we have hybrid services, you might have 20 people in line who had already submitted their permit, who are waiting for staff response, who are looking for some kind of other help. But if they're not in front of me in this moment, that's the person who's going to get the priority. So we're not necessarily taking that into account. And then there's really lastly, like no unified policies for LDT customer service. So we don't have either individual counters or kind of dealing with their own strategy for how to manage all the emails, manage the voicemails, manage walk-in customers, or staff are doing it on an individual basis of like, if I'm scheduled to work the counter, here's how I'm going to address all these channels of communication coming at me. So we need to have there's nothing unified from an LDT perspective. Next slide. When it comes to the problems with virtual appointments, there was no advance notice. Someone could schedule a virtual appointment a minute before it was supposed to start. So if I'm working the counter and someone just scheduled that, but I've been helping, I might blow that virtual appointment off entirely because I just didn't know about it at the beginning of my shift. Or again, I'm trying to help somebody. So it doesn't necessarily help staff prepare. And it's not good customer service if we accidentally miss people, and we did. let's be honest. Our check-in policy, so we had a really awkward check-in policy for people who walked in the door. We'd make them go to their computer, check in to kind of schedule an appointment, but we were really inconsistent. It was a way to try to track the number of people we were helping, but we were inconsistent about implementation, and that doesn't help us understand kind of what are the needs and what are people coming in for and what is a good experience for customers. And then overall, a lack of accommodation. So what I mean by that is virtual appointments were happening at the counter. So the lobby would be open, you'd have someone walk in, and then someone also, your counter buddy might be doing a virtual appointment at the same time with all this noise and kind of background. So it really wasn't conducive to hosting a good conversation, as we know is really critical for Zoom meetings. Next slide. So the target for lobby operations is like, what are our desired outcomes and some of our success metrics? We know that the future is hybrid. We want to make sure that we keep all of these different services, because as I mentioned before, our two themes is that we know there's high demand for in-person. We also know there's high demand for, I want to do everything online. So we need to maintain all of these different channels, whether it's in-person, virtual, phone, email, that's critical. We also need to manage our workload, because our staffing fluctuates, but how can we better manage our counter task workload based on our current staffing levels, and how do we help our operations in that regard? And then lastly, presenting some kind of LDT customer service policy so that collectively as the LDT across all of our counters, that we know what the expectations are, and we know to what extent we can report out and how much we're meeting those expectations once they're solidified. Next slide. In terms of our target for virtual appointments, we want to make sure that we have adequate time and space. The space one is fairly, straightforward in terms of just having the quality of conversation for our customers in those virtual appointments and staff being able to concentrate. But really the time is just making sure that staff are prepared and that they know kind of what to expect in order to help them prepare for it and have a better quality conversation. Making sure that we connect the right staff to the questions that we get. This is a consistency thing. This goes back to if someone has a question about something and we, rather than 18 planning staff member, counter staffers, all expected to be the experts in one thing, how can we match that person, that customer's question, to the right staff person so that they can get their question answered? And then setting expectations is really more of a clear expectation that we want to have for customers. We're talking about counter services. Counter services are limited in terms of, we get so many complex questions that come across our desks that require a ton of research, that require, thinking across the LDT members, and those aren't counter questions. So we need to be realistic and help customers understand what is an appropriate counter question and when do we need to say, oh, this is actually sounds like you might want to look into this type of service because this is going to best help you. Next slide. And taking a step back as we're doing all of our analysis, looking at the root cause of all of these issues and whether looking at it for both the lobby and for virtual appointments, we're able to look back at the bigger issue is clearly the overnight transition to virtual counter services due to COVID-19 wasn't designed for long-term implementation. We were scrambling, and I thought in a very effective way for the most part, to make something happen, to create services that we didn't have before, and to change our business practices overnight. But as we're implementing all of these different communication channels, now, again, we have the luxury to look back and say, hey, this isn't working, and it wasn't meant to be designed like this. We also have an outdated service model. Again, our focus is first come, first serve, and that's outdated in a hybrid environment. We need to leverage technology and understand who are all the customers who are waiting in line virtually or who are walking in, and how can we think about them a little bit differently in this new context. And then this question of who's in charge and just identifying that as a lack of communication from our decision makers. The LDT is a really large group of multiple departments, divisions, and then our counter services specifically, that too is different departments and divisions. So oftentimes it's really difficult to know when a particular counter can do something. We have different staff levels for each of the counters, and it's really hard. It's been hard in the past to know when we're implementing a new policy and how to make that decision across the board. Next slide. So the solutions that we came up with through this analysis, one, big picture is a customer service vision. This is creating an LDT customer service vision or strategy that we can all implement, that we all agree to, that we all understand, that staff can be trained. And so that we're collective and consistent in how we apply and how we prioritize and think about things, no matter what our different staffing levels are, or no matter how different our counter services operate. Secondly, it's modifying the days and hours for walk-ins and how we can think about doing this based on the data that we have available and staff's input. So again, we can't be everything all at once and offer all of these different services all at once when there's only one or two of us. So how can we modify those things in order to start to separate out and identify other opportunities where staff can be supportive? And similarly, that goes to reorganizing some of our counter services so that we don't have different customers overlapping. And that kind of gets to that point of that I was talking about in terms of, hey, someone walks into the counter, but I've got, as a counter staffer, I've got a virtual appointment. I don't want to have a virtual appointment be possibly scheduled when I have walk-ins too. So I don't have that awkward thing of like, I've got to leave you now in order to walk over to my computer. Next slide. In terms of solutions for virtual appointments, just eliminate the check-in system altogether. Just allow walk-ins to walk in like old times, but just doing so with slightly limited hours. Making sure that we have 24-hour notice before someone can't just apply or grab an appointment, a virtual appointment, a minute before it's supposed to start. That 24-hour notice not only alerts us to the type of question that they have, but that allows us to match the right staff to that question or give staff the opportunity to connect with the people that they need to connect with in order to get the right answers. And then lastly, assigning staff and location. Again, that goes back to the assigning the appropriate staff and finding a location that is the most conducive to a quality virtual appointment. Next slide. So what we've done, all of this analysis was done kind of coordinating across the entire LDT and coming up with a plan for how we were going to reopen as soon as it was determined safe enough to do so after the Omicron variant. So in the middle of February, I don't have the exact date in my mind, we opened up our lobby to new hours and to try to kind of reorganize how we do some of our services. So the past, just as a reference point, our lobby hours were open 8:30 to 4:30, Monday through Thursday, and alternate Fridays. And that was for walk-in customers, in-person appointments, virtual appointments, application intake, and phone and email. And that's kind of what the narrative that I've been discussing and kind of the craze that staff have been trying to manage all of this at all times of day when there's only one or two people there on top of their other workload. Secondly, or I guess what we are now doing, the current thing is we are open for walk-in customers. Our lobby hours at 630 Garden Street are open for walk-in customers from 8:30 to noon, Monday through Thursdays. If you walk in as a customer, our priority is to make sure that we're working with you. We don't need to worry that there are no other virtual appointments scheduled at the same time. You're not expected to do application intake. You're really just there to serve the walk-in customers. And when there's no one there, you're answering phones and you're responding to voicemails or responding to emails in order just to help manage that. That doesn't mean, even though our lobby doors are have been modified, we are still providing counter services that just aren't necessarily happening at the counter. And those counter services are happening Monday through Thursday and the alternate Fridays all day from 8:30 to 4:30. And that type of service, we're doing virtual appointments, application intake, and phone and email. So all of that's still happening every single day that we're open. It's just our limitation for walk-in customers has been reduced in order to make up for more time and for staff to be able to kind of think more clearly and just prioritize whatever it is before them. And so that they're not expected to do everything all at once and to do everything ineffectively. Next slide. In terms of follow-up, so we are a month in. I mean, it might be just a little bit, a couple of days over a month of trying out these new lobby operations. We communicated this through our LDT channels and our lobby hours. We're getting new signage. But what's really going to be critical is tracking customers in this collective effort to make sure we track the number of customers served and the type of services that are requested for people walking in and for virtual appointments. We want to know what's still bringing people in these doors. We know that there are some people who just want that personal connection, and that's okay. And that's why we have our lobby hours the way we do. But we also want to understand, are there things that we could bolster virtually that we might be able to help out with, or where there are some things that can't happen online right now, so that people are still coming in. So what are the ways that we can understand that and understand why people are coming in and what types of questions? And that's so we can look at our operations and staffing. How does this inform future staffing and the types of questions that we're getting, how we might be able to respond to that a little bit more nimbly, or how to add more services, or maybe we need to make website updates or certain things that might help people in the types of questions they're receiving. And things change, there's like a planning issue du jour, a building issue du jour. So all of this can be addressed as we move forward. And then really critical is that LDT customer service vision. So we went through this whole exercise of creating an LDT mission, vision, and values. And so that next level of like getting into it is that customer service strategy. And that's actually something that is in the NOVAC report. So it's just, again, re-emphasizing the need for that. And this is kind of the next natural step to do so, to make sure that we're all on the same page. Next slide. So I do have some preliminary data of the last month and kind of what's happening on the ground for building and safety and planning, a little bit more for community development. So we're tracking the number of customers each day. When are customers visiting the lobby for walk-in service? This is an average taken throughout the month. For building and safety, you see that Wednesdays and Thursdays tend to be a little bit, have a little bit more walk-in traffic than Mondays or Tuesdays. Next slide, please. For planning, we don't have as many people coming in across the board, but generally it's consistent Monday through Thursday of the number of customers we're helping at each counter shift from that. Again, this is 8:30 to noon. That's a counter shift when our lobby doors are open. This is the number of people that we're serving through walk-ins. Next slide. And then the types of services that we're providing. And if you have questions about this, we can address them at the end, but what are people coming in for? Some are coming in for counter permits, code questions, and then there's this whole big other category. Next slide, please. And that's for building and safety. For planning, people are coming in about use and zoning questions. That's 40%, 11% is enforcement. 30% is about the planning process. How do I navigate? What's going on? What is my project subject to? We have a little bit of web and Acela, and then there's just this 15% category for other. And next slide. And I just want to point out that, or maybe if you could go back one, I'm so sorry. I do want to say that not only are we tracking the number of customers that we have each day and the types of the things that they're coming in, the questions that they're coming in for, but we can also look at, we're breaking it down hour by hour to see when we have the most traffic And on the whole, across the different counters, our most trafficked hours are from 10:30 to noon every single day. So it tends to be a little bit quieter in the mornings, but 10:30 to noon is generally when we see the most people walk through our doors. And that concludes my presentation. We're certainly here to answer any questions. I think I think we were gonna do questions now. So I would thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kokinda. So questions from Member Jordan on the changes to the, sorry, drawing a blank, changes to the counter.
I'll just start by saying best presentation ever at any one of these meetings over the last year. So I had probably part of that is because you just got to focus on one particularly, troublesome item and focus on that rather than the kitchen sink of the whole list. But those are such great slides. I think I just have two questions. And it kind of has that one question you had on one of the slides of who's in charge. So the two items that resonate with what I hear frequently are the consistency and accountability. That's one item. I'm calling that one item. And then the other one is the teamwork and the collaboration. So I hear all the time, forever, that if you're dealing with even different people in the same process, the consistency is wildly varying in the advice they get or the path they're told to take one path one time and then take another path the next time. And that could be also true in the teamwork part, because sometimes you're working different sections of your lobby and one section tells you this is the way to do it, and you go to another section and they tell you that's not the way to do it, or I'm not going to help you, and you go back. Or even sometimes, like I saw the fire marshal on here today too, even you might get department to department and that gets messed up. So kind of my let off with my question, like who's in charge? So you affect the change with this kind of presentation and this kind of effort, and the change begins, and then maybe it just tapers a little bit from the enthusiasm part and goes back to the same old kind of job thing. Who is in charge when the customer's experience starts to suffer and get away from these changes? How does a customer bring that to somebody's attention?
I'm happy to answer that, Councilmember Jordan. So it varies. So if we're helping a customer at the counter and they're dissatisfied with the service, they might express that to the person in front of them or the supervisor or manager, and then we try to address that at the time or as soon as possible. The question of who's in charge of the LDT comes up fairly often, and more or less was self-delegated to the community development director a couple of years ago. Somebody needed to be in charge because there were times when issues would come up with conflicting regulations and the applicant is stuck in the middle and someone needed to make a decision. So for those types of really, higher level decision-making needs, it's been designated as the community development director. But it doesn't often have to get to that level. There are many supervisors and managers along the way who step in on a daily basis and try to resolve customer service concerns. We do have a counter committee. So staff who regularly work the counter do meet monthly and try to talk about processes and policies about counter operations. And so some things can be resolved there if it's just a matter of, process getting people caught up. But I'm not sure if that's the type of customer service concern you were talking about.
Let me so I get all that, where internally there's a system, but let's say it's not evident internally. It's just I'm having trouble with a particular thing. I got two different answers from two different people. I don't want to stand there and yell. I don't want to ask for your supervisor and become part of a viral video on YouTube. How do we, so I guess my suggestion would be, because the way you've explained it, I understand the way it is. It varies, it's different people, different situations. Is there a way that we can just have one method that we share or notice or post that if you've really had a bad experience, go bother this person and that person will serve as the gatekeeper to go. As you know, frequently it's me or Eric or 5 other people that are elected. And I don't think that's really effective, because then it's really just somebody who knows us or knows how to get to us and becomes a squeaky wheel, and it's a one-off. It's not a group effort of taking ownership over. Some people do walk in there and they walk out unhappy, but they're not manifesting their unhappiness. And is there a method for them to see easily one person they can go say, this is what happened. Am I an idiot, or are you an idiot? Who's the bad party here? Right? Does that make sense?
Understood. Yeah, and I think that really segues into what Ms. Kokenda said earlier in her presentation, is what we see as our next step is coming up with an LDT customer service strategy. So at least, the front line workers, for lack of a better term, have the same understanding of, here's your priorities, here's how we help people, here's how we hand off one person from one counter to the other. You don't just go send them into the abyss, you kind of walk them over, hold their hand virtually or not. So setting up those kind of expectations could be one way that we try to just prevent some of that stuff from happening. But if your question is, is there one person that everybody knows you go to when there's an issue? No, I would say that we don't have that established. I think people tend to go up within their own division or department, see if it gets resolved there. Of course, we do collaborate across departments too, if something, someone's
Okay.
getting.
So that would be my suggestion. If you've ever gotten one of my work emails from me, just because I used it from work, there's always a trail down on there about, we strive to meet your expectations. If we're doing good or doing bad, here's my manager's email address right there on every one of my outgoing emails. And so maybe it's just as simple as when you go through the next working with this, if there's just a customer service sign, if you've had a bad experience, and you don't want to stand in line with 10 other people and be the guy holding up the line and having everybody stare at you because you want to talk to a supervisor or something like that. Here's just somebody to touch base with and bounce it off of them, and they'll know who to take it to or who to refer you to for the next step, kind of thing. I think, I don't know, be kind of cool. And then I go back, you and I both date, and I remember when you used to walk in, I don't go in the front door anymore frequently, so I don't know, but there used to be like a little square porch desk there and a person sitting there, and you would go to that person and say, here's what I need to do, and that person would say, you're going here, you're going there. Are we able to get to that somehow in either in person or even not virtual appointments, but virtual type of processes, to where, like, I've just referred a really good friend to, I'm doing a test with you. He's in Yankee Hill Farm, whatever, over there at Campanile Hill. He's going to do an ADU. And so I said, oh, I'm going to test this. So I took the ADU website. I said, start here and look to the right on the link with the 12 pages of the ADU staff stuff. And I said, because his question to me was, which staff member do I talk to? And I'm going, no, you're going to do a little work first. And then I gave him the email for the desk, right? That's shown there. And so it's kind of a little self-test to see how's that going to work for somebody that I go out to dinner with, and I'll hear from him, good or bad. But if you just know you want to do like an addition to your house, or you want to, it's just whatever the simple ones that always come up. Is there a way to start that process without walking in and kind of looking 3 different directions and going, which one of those sets of counters do I really go to? And is that part of this?
Yes, so there's a lot in there, but let me see if I can address it all. So in terms of, right, thinking back to many years ago when we had a receptionist type position in the front of the lobby, that was really helpful. Budget constraints, that position went away. There was a recommendation in the Novak report to bring back something like that. Of course, that was before the pandemic and before we went to so many remote and virtual services. So I don't know if having a physical person in the lobby is the best use of resources at this point, especially when we're seeing in-person traffic, at least right now, not really high. But our hope, our objective with the city's website, both now to the extent we can, and then certainly when we get the new website, is to try to build out the land development pages in a way that makes sense to a customer and are geared toward those types of questions.
Yep.
I want to put
Perfect.
up a fence.
Yep.
Where do I go? Kind of choose your own adventure versus right now it's very focused on departments, divisions. You kind of need to know where to start. And then you might get directed to other folks. But our counter staff will help too. If people come in and ask questions, not for us necessarily, but we think we know who they need to talk to, of course, we'll direct them. That's why we're also trying to match these virtual appointment questions with the staff who know the most
Right.
about that subject. So you want to, if you put in your virtual appointment, I want to ask about how to permit an ADU, we're going to connect you with Brenda Belts.
Yeah,
And
the in-person part of that is if you're in that situation, you're busy and there's somebody at the counter with both people or 3 people and there's 3 more people standing there waiting around, you're obviously not going to get your question answered very quick. So I just, that's my personal experience too. So I'm glad to hear we're working on that. So again, this is the best however many pages I've seen on one of these reports yet. It's great work. I love everything you've started to embark on. I love the internal and the external surveys, and I love the method that you're attempting to use that and implement. So really good stuff. Thanks.
Thank you. I would just add that as part of this, it's also on slide 9, it was the challenges of survey from the staff. The second highest, tied for bullet, was 11 responses. Said, I don't know who to contact for help or nobody around. So as we're trying to figure out who the person at staff should be as the contact, it also helps that when we figure that out, the staff knows on such and such an issue, you can go here or you can go there. And I think that would help if they come to the counter and send him to the right place. So I have some questions. The other, I had a question on slide 18. So in the past, the bullets here don't line up. They're in the past, it says there's in-person appointments, but there isn't anything listed on current for in-person. And I know in talking with you ahead of time that there are a certain number of individuals who still like, for whatever reason, still like to have in-person appointments. Either they just aren't tech savvy or they just need to have that extra touch. So where do those fall in with the new current?
Thank you, Chair Friedman. And in regards to this, thank you for bringing that up. So our walk-in, so when we modified the lobby hours to be 8:30 to noon, Monday through Thursdays, the idea is just first come, first serve. Because what we were finding is that if someone makes an appointment at the counter, but then we have walk-ins and that someone is helping a walk-in person and then you have an appointment at the same time, it's really awkward to say, okay, I've got to actually deal with you right now. So we just made it across the board, first come, first serve as walk-ins, but that doesn't preclude any LDT staff member to schedule an in-person appointment at any time they desire. It just might not, they might not be staffing the counter, but I can make an in-person appointment at any time of day and just meet someone and let them in the door. Or if it's something specific, if it's during the hours that the lobby is open, they could just meet right there. So it doesn't preclude any particular staff member to make an in-person appointment at any time that are during business hours.
So you can still make those. It's just the standard now is to have the walk-ins, but if there's a project that's coming through and someone needs to make an appointment, you can still do that.
Right. And it's just to think about the counter, the people who are staffing the counter are just focused on walk-in customers, but those, and generally for each counter, it's 1 or 2 people. So that leaves the rest of the entire LDT staff to be able to make in-person appointments at any time they wish.
The other just comment I would say is, as we make these changes, is just how we publicize them and get them out through our normal means. I'm sure you're working on that as well. And on that, so I don't have any further questions on this one. So now we're going to go on to Acela optimization.
Yes, thank you, Chair Friedman and Councilmember Jordan. Just a few more slides here. Another topic you've heard us speak about several times in terms of needing to improve process has to do with our permit tracking system, Acela. And then Acela Citizen Access is the customer facing part of Acela. So just next slide here, little bit of reminder. So when we transitioned from Tidemark to Acela several years ago, we were still taking applications in paper. Everything was coming in across the counter in paper applications and paper plans and routing them to staff sequentially. So one staff person wouldn't get the set of plans until the staff person before them was done viewing them. And so Acela was set up with that process in mind and was almost operating pretty well until April 2020, when we very quickly within weeks switched to taking plans and all application materials in digitally. And then we launched Acela Citizen Access, which we had planned to do at some point, but not within that time frame. And I just say all this because we're still catching up from all of that. Change to the process to receive everything digitally. Now, I mean, there's a lot of benefits to doing that. We now all staff can review plans all at the same time. You don't have to wait for the person in front of you to be done. Applicants love having the ability to upload their plans and materials 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're still adjusting to that at the staff side of things and managing that workload, because it used to just come in our doors between 8:30 and 4:30, Monday through Thursday and every other Friday. And now it's coming in all the time. So when we switched to digital plan submittal and review in April 2020, it significantly changed our business practices. And so we're still catching up with making those changes to both the internal side of Acela and the customer facing side to make that more user-friendly and intuitive. So some of the things that we're focused on based on our customer input and our staff experience with Acela is our customers are saying that their experience with Acela Citizen Access is not intuitive. It's not even consistent across the different types of applications that they're submitting through Acela. So they're having to kind of relearn things each time they have a different type of application. Also, there's just information that's not as readily available as it used to be when we had Tidemark, and that's reports that we had automatically generated and posted to the web, information, just basic information to properties, property site statistics, and then the project status that people, all members of the public could just check on the project status by going on and doing a search through an automatic report in Tidemark. So that's still not on par with our prior system. And that generates a lot of activity for our counter staff, actually, because they're having to manually answer those questions for customers because it's not just out there on Acela and easy for them to find. And then there's a lot of tasks being performed by staff in taking the applications and routing them throughout the whole review process that should really be automated. And but we have good news to share, and that's why we brought this to the LDTO, as you are likely aware, because council just heard this item last week, I believe, is as part of the American Rescue Plan Act funds, council allocated $250,000 to help assist in this effort to optimize Acela. As I mentioned, we're still dealing with a backlog of needs to make changes to the different case types in Acela, to automate a lot of the tasks that staff are having to do manually. And that list has just been too long for existing information technology staff to manage and keep up with as our business practices continue to change, as we continue to make improvements to it. So most of this money would go towards increasing our contract with an existing consultant that we use, who right now has been helping us just kind of like fix things as they become broken. We want to use them to get through this backlog of updates we need to Acela. And then we have some money put away for the necessary upgrade to Acela, which will be needed at some point in time. So with this, Our goal is to increase functionality and improve the user experience of Acela, both for staff and the customer, and then enhance those reporting tools that we can have readily available to customers and members of the public online so that they can access this information whenever they want and not have to rely on staff to get it for them. So wanted to share that good news. Acela is the root of many people's frustrations. So when we have good news to share about making some headway in that regard, we wanted to share it. And that's it from my part. If there's any questions on this aspect.
Questions, Mr. Jordan?
Ms. Brooke, I will just ashamedly take back my non-support for that item now, last Tuesday, as part of those funds. So you remember, you and I actually sat and had a work session on Acela, and I would tell you that I am still on those first two bullets anytime I attempt to use it. You know, it'd be, so it's either me or the system or a combination of both, but I look at two screens all day long in my real world too. I consider myself relatively intuitive on working with data, but you know, I'll have somebody contact me, say there's a project out of control. I'll put the address in, and all I get is like a bunch of just notes that go nowhere. Whereas what I remember on the old system, it would have the MST number or something, and you'd whack it, and you'd get a screen full of data entry stuff. The person that put in the lifetime of the project, basically from start to end, and any notes that were in there. And so I would agree that those first two bullets are, if I try and be a customer, are true. And I guess I don't like that to hear that we're just fixing things as we have to. I mean, I guess I would encourage you to do the proactive fix and ask for whatever those resources are, so we don't just continue to ding and ding and ding this system along. And that if we're in it, we want it to work, and we know what it can do for us and what it can do for our customers. We just need to get there, and not just kind of, you know, halfway get there or partway get there, and only get there when we really have to. We should be all in. And so I'd encourage you to make that request, you know, whatever that is, and we'll fight over it and see what we can do. So thanks.
But to kind of follow up on this, so in terms of maximizing, so I know that there's different systems out there, and we're with Acela, and we're using those ARPA funds to supplement some of the work we're doing now to catch us up in a lot of different ways on upgrading the system. But the council had previously authorized a position with for this. Can you just give an update on where that position is?
Certainly, thank you, Chair Friedman. So, right, council had authorized an additional position in information technology to be oversee an administrator of the Acela program, and IT has had challenges in filling that position. It was filled for a few weeks, I think sometime last year. And then unfortunately that person left shortly after being hired, and they've not been able to fill it since. So that's partially why we have this big backlog of requests for changes to Acela. And I can't speak to exactly why it's been a challenge. I know that they have kind of retooled the job description this second time around in the recruitment, so I don't know if there's anyone else here on staff who can speak more to that, but we've been hoping for that position to be filled for some time so that we have an in-house person who kind of gets to understand our business practices and then can make those changes to Acela much more quickly. Our IT staff are doing the best they can given everything else they have to do, and so there's still some reliance on land development staff to be doing some of these changes in Acela, which is not sustainable. So we do want to Councilmember Jordan's point, we do want to get past this big hurdle so that we're all functioning more efficiently and can be focused on our actual land development work and not so much on technology issues and customers with technology issues, because that's a big part of what the counter ends up fielding too, is helping people get through their project upload in Acela.
Great, and so part of that would be then this position, we're evaluating if the job description fits what we need as we're going through. And then once we get this new position, hopefully that will be a big part of getting us to where I think Councilmember Jordan was referring to, optimizing the amount of staff time we have dedicated towards it. So we're not being reactive, we're being more proactive, we're working with the community. So
Correct, that's our hope.
and so we do have that budgeted, and we are working to get there. Just wanted to put that out there. So at this point, I will ask for public comment. So any member of the public who wishes to speak to this item, please raise your hand in the app. And
Thank you, Chair Friedman. There are no members of the public who have raised their hand to make a public comment.
I will close public comments. And any final comments on this one before we close that item, Mr. Jordan?
Nope.
Perfect. Well, I just want to thank staff for the presentation today. It was great, and I'm pleased that we were able to take the results of the survey and make some necessary changes that are more customer service oriented, and for our staff as well, because I think building that teamwork within the staff is going to be very helpful. So we're able to use that data and then move forward. So with that, I'll close this item, and then our next subcommittee meeting.
So Mr. Chair, I didn't know if we were going to talk about the dreaded spreadsheet. And we don't need to, but I had a comment about that, Renee. So I want to thank you for seeing it again. But every time I see it, it just overwhelms me. The presentation today on just a particular focus of customer service kind of just way more impresses me with. We had something, we tackled it, we did it, rather than looking at the columns on the spreadsheet. And I just think, I know all those things are being worked on, but in particular, the whole customer service thing was kind of part of that entire list of items anyhow, where that it plays a role in all of it. But that format for me is much more positive. I mean, I take away much more positive feeling after one of these meetings that, yeah, we're really doing some really cool stuff that's making a difference. And so if there's other ones on that in the future that you want to attack like that, rather than just horribly go line through line and say where you are, I'd encourage you to do that. Okay.
You must have been reading our mind. I was pre-meeting with staff ahead of this, Mr. Jordan, and we do have some suggestions in terms of the format of how we're going to meet, but some timelines to get us there so we can be more strategic, because we're going to start getting into some of the more complex areas of reform that we're looking at. So that kind of gets into where the next subcommittee meeting, instead of monthly, the recommendation. So Ms. Brooke, if you could speak to when the next meeting is.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So what we'd propose is our next subcommittee meeting be probably in June. So we know council and city staff are busy with budget season. We're in the swing of it now. That will give us a couple of months to make some progress on some more items. So we'll have something substantive, hopefully, to share with you in June. And then in that meeting, we might lay out for you what we'd like to be working on over the next 6 months, maybe have a little bit longer stretch in between that following subcommittee meeting, as we share with you in June some things that we'll be working on. That might take some time, but we'd clear that with you first. That would be our proposal. Sometime in June. We don't have an exact date. If the committee members agree with that approach, we'll find a date that works for folks.
So the June works for me, and the thinking is that items just like these, they take some time to implement, and so they're able to come back and give presentations just like this. If this is what we've done, or this was the problem, this is what we're doing, and we're implementing it now. And it's just not conducive to having monthly or sometimes even quarterly meetings on this. It's more of, we want to have items like this that we can present And so right now, it looks like June, there'll be a couple more, hopefully, that we can have a presentation similar to this on other issues. And then we can discuss what the work plan is for this committee and staff going forward on some of these larger issues. So you open to that, Mr. Jordan? Having a meeting in June and then kind of looking out the rest.
You
of the
bet,
year?
I like that. To me, it's, again, I like the format and the accomplishments today, and to me, it's just continuing to show improvement, biting off those little bites until they're a full mouthful, rather than just obsessively focusing on this list that was generated by the Novak report. So I really appreciate that.
Perfect. And then we still have the list that's updated for us to look at on our own, so we can see if there's any questions we have.
Yes,
So,
thank you for that. That is always posted on the LDTO website for anyone who's interested, the status of where we are in the process improvements. And I will just add another reason I would support having the LDTO meetings spread out a little bit more in the coming months, is because we have kind of address some of the low-hanging fruit and some of the next things that we really need to dig into to make noticeable improvements into the land development process will be more in depth and require some more time to implement. So we just might not be ready to report back every 2 or 3 months at that stage.
okay, so we won't pick a date yet because we'll need to check with Councilmember Gutierrez on the calendar, but you'll get that out to us. So the next meeting is tentatively early June. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. See you in June. Thank you.
Thank you.